All right.
This is one, because then the last, the
Is
other
this-
last meeting people do.
Somebody was sitting here? Okay.
It's all for you.
All right.
All right, so we are live. We are live. So I'm going to call the meeting to order. I do believe we have a quorum. So we would have, including me, we would. Excellent. So following that determination, we've got Mark Rebelard, a member of this committee, has requested to participate remotely. So I want to make sure Mark is live with us. Mark, if you're there, please state your location and identify whether anyone else is in the room with you at that location.
Hi, I'm at my home at 64 Blackberry Lane in Keene. My wife is in another room and my son is downstairs. I had planned to be on vacation and unfortunately my son's got COVID, so still need to be away from you all.
Oh, good to have you here, Mark. Thank you.
Thanks.
Just a reminder of the committee, we also have a remote minute taker, and so all members have to use these microphones when they want to speak. Basically, green means that it's live, and when you're not speaking, it should be red. Just switch back and forth, you can press the button like that. Another reminder is you might want to state your name for the minute taker if you want to say something. That's good practice. So with that, I've got I'll need a motion from a committee member and a second on the minutes of the April 19th meeting.
Before we go, Mr. Mayor, probably just do attendance real quick for folks
Okay.
just to identify themselves that they're here.
Sure, okay, I can call the attendance. So Mayor George Hansel is here, Councilor Randy Filio,
Here.
Councilor Mitchell Greenwald is absent, Councilor Andrew Madison is absent, Elizabeth Dragon is absent, Robert Patton Spruill is absent, Alex Faulkner. Alex is here. Brandy Wells.
Here.
Brandy is here. Natalie Howder.
Here.
Natalie is here. Cheryl Belair is absent. Dylan Bennick is absent. Alec
Nope,
Doyle.
I'm here.
Whoop, there you are. Sorry about that, Dylan.
That's okay.
Alec Doyle.
Here.
Alec Doyle is here, and Mark Rebelard is participating remotely. So with that, I would accept a motion on the minutes in a second, please.
So moved on the minutes?
We have a motion from Randy Filio, Councilor Randy Filio,
I'll second.
and we have a second by Dylan Bennick. Any discussion? Seeing none, are you ready for a vote? Please show your hands in the affirmative if you want to pass the minutes. Anyone opposed? All right, it is unanimous. Mr. Public Works Director.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Corp Blomquist, Public Works Director, Emergency Management Director, and again, welcome committee to your second meeting of the Downtown Infrastructure Improvement and Reconstruction Project Steering Committee. This afternoon, really very excited. Today, we'll have Stantec, our consultant, with Ed Robiger, and I'm messing the name up, but that's okay. He'll correct me later. Who will be taking over and walking through your agenda items today with the project. Before we go, we do have a communication that I just would like to review with the committee. I did forward it out as part of the invite to you. The committee has received or the mayor's office received a communication from the Disability Rights Center of New Hampshire. This is an organization that advocates for disability, mobility issues throughout the state, involving such things as the ADA. You'll get familiar with the PROAG, which is for, as they refer to them now, basically a standard of care for the public way for dealing with mobility types of improvements, et cetera, for the community. What they have requested, and they have forwarded on a communication to the committee, is one, certainly encouraging the community committee and the community as we're looking at the redoing of downtown, that we take into consideration and work towards reduction of any types of physical barriers that act to impede participation by our mobility challenge and visually and hearing communities. They also sort of asked the committee to consider a couple different items. One was to consider adding another member from the disability community or a member from a organization that represents those issues. They would also like to meet with stakeholders, et cetera, and also have a potentially a separate forum. What I'm recommending for the committee's consideration is certainly we do have a public forum coming up. We will, as part of that, we are looking at having an area to deal with mobility issues in the downtown that people see today and help provide some input on that. So I think that will meet one of the thoughts that is in the letter about having a forum on this issue particularly. We're also going to move forward is the staff with the consultant will contact these folks to have a discussion with them just as, about the project, see where they can provide some additional input, et cetera, for the particular project. So I'll be recommending that we take that action. It's certainly up to the committee and the mayor if you feel you want to add another committee member, but we'll handle the other two items that they are talking about.
Thank you. So just to let the committee know, if we wanted to add a member, it would have to go through the city council nomination and confirmation process. So there would be a bit of a process to do that. But anyone want to comment on this? No? All set with the plan that the Public Works Director has laid out? Okay.
Great, so if you would
Yeah,
just.
Alex.
I would just, Court, you mentioned it as folks with, just with physical disabilities, but I think there's probably a broader definition too that people are talking about as well. So just for general edification.
Yeah, you're correct, and again, I try to, again, their language here was focused on mobility issues, but
Yes.
you are correct. I think Keene's goals have been, and many of our project goals are, again, I like using, again, multi-use, making sure that we can, all users can utilize our downtown and the areas there. Sight, hearing, anything that would provide potential impediment, making sure that our projects can reduce those sort of situations.
Brady?
Would a liaison between a member and a local agency be sufficient?
I think we're open to any ideas.
Yeah, I worked for MDS for 20 years, and I know the mobility issues in downtown personally, and I am still linked into that organization if they would want to have conversation rather than go through the process, but
I think that's great. If you're offering to do that and share the information, I mean, that's an excellent suggestion.
yeah.
Great. Anybody else? Okay.
Just a motion probably to accept.
Yeah, so I would look for a motion to accept this communication as informational.
So moved.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion by Councilor Randy Filio, a second by Dylan Bennick. Any discussion? Seeing none, are you ready for a vote? All those in favor? Opposed? It's unanimous. Public
Great.
Works Director.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to turn it over to Ed Roder. Ed, I'm just going to say, I'm going to turn it over to Ed, who will now take over and lead the committee through the discussions from our consultant. With that, I'm going to move out of the way.
Perfect. Thanks, Court. And I'm going to slide over so that we'll just have so we can follow the screen as well. Each of us will speak today. So, well, thank you, Mayor and members of the committee. My name is Ed Roberge, and I'm a civil engineer with Stantec Consulting Services, Inc., and we're really pleased to be here today. We'll talk a little bit about our project, introduction to the project team. We'll look at, really want to get into kind of our understanding of the project and the opportunities that exist. We'll talk a little bit about our work plan and how we're structured to move forward. A little bit about schedule, and then what we hope at the end is to have kind of a roundtable conversation about any issues, concerns, opportunities that you would like to share as well. Up on the screen is a pretty broad organizational chart that outlines our teaming structure. With me here today is Bob Corning to my left. He's our vision and design team lead, and he'll really be instrumental in working through the development of goals, understandings, moving forward with design alternatives, options, and all of the creative components here. Dave McNamara is our deputy. Well, we actually co-lead the project. Myself as a project director on the planning study component. Dave McNamara more so on the design elements. So we'll collaborate together. we thought bringing both of us together was a good move for the highest quality of this project. The team is broad. It covers a lot of functions, so we're really pleased and proud of that. Working closely with Court and his team it's been a great start so far, and we're really looking forward to communicate here today with our understanding of the project. So with that, I'm going to, before I hand it off, this notion of, what is the downtown core? What is it part of? And what will it become? So one of the goals that was stated in the RFP to get us engaged here was expand the downtown district or the downtown core. And what exactly does that mean? You'll start to see us talking about when we get to the public workshop, which is coming up. Exactly what are those limits? Is it right immediately along Main Street? And we understand it. We'd love to get some input back from you folks. Is how do you expand that to make it deeper, longer and wider? So that's really trying to understand a little bit better from you folks on what exactly is the expanse of your downtown core, beyond just how it's zoned today. What is it for tomorrow? So it's a great opportunity to have that conversation. I'm going to hand it off to Dave. And he's going to talk really, the reason why we're essentially here is understanding the utility infrastructure improvements. So, Dave, have at it.
Sure. Thanks, Ed. My name's Dave McNamara with Stantec. Yeah, and as Ed mentioned, one of the key drivers to this project is that infrastructure, the underground infrastructure out here that's, in a lot of cases, well over 100 years old. The water lines, the sewer lines, the drainage, as well as a number of private utilities that are both kind of in the Main Street area as well as behind a lot of those buildings along Main Street. So what we're doing now is we're working with DPW staff. We're really getting a handle on the condition of those existing pipes, existing infrastructure, come up with the best solutions to improve them, to replace them, or to line them, or a number of different methods in which we can bring those pipes up to standard and in a better working condition. So that includes both the public, the water, the sewer, the drain, as well as the private, the underground power, the communication lines and whatnot. And so that's really going to drive the impacts of what we need to do there. And then that's going to open up the opportunity on the street side to start to look at some different options and different alternatives of what we can do at the street level. That's utility work.
Great. Thank you, Dave.
And good afternoon, everybody. I'm Bob Corning. I'm a landscape architect and urban planner at Stantec, and I'll be leading the visioning and the public realm design efforts for this project. As Dave mentioned, with the utility work that's going to be done, the public realm and the surface is going to be impacted in different ways, yet to be determined yet. But with that, we recognize that Keene has, the downtown, the historic downtown has a really unique image and character. It's got a great vibe with, canopy trees, the kind of diverse and eclectic uses around the perimeter, a great vibrant art scene that you stumble upon in various locations. It's really got a great character and quality to it. And our goal really is to think about it in three different ways: to preserve what's important to the extent that we can, enhance and expand areas that we think might be able to use some improvements, and then areas that are impacted significantly replace in a way that's respectful of the downtown in the history of Keene. We also want to look at existing open spaces for opportunities to expand them to support more events, gatherings, and other uses. Particularly Railroad Square is one that comes to mind. It's one that's been discussed numerous times so far as an opportunity to potentially improve that public open space. We also want to look at opportunities to improve the access for everybody and prioritizing pedestrians and bicycles while making sure that vehicular circulation flows and is safe. As we discussed earlier, universal access will be an important part of this part of the project in the thinking in terms of looking at improvements of the public realm. We've already heard a lot about parking. You know, is there enough? Is there too much? Is it in the right place? Our mobility team has experience working with municipalities on parking analysis and parking studies to make sure that not only there's sufficient parking, but it's in the right place. And that's going to be an important part of this project and have a lot of impact on the public realm. We also want to look at opportunities for sustainability, whether it's stormwater, whether it's reducing heat island, all the different aspects of having a sustainable environment. We'll look at opportunities to incorporate that into the project.
I'm going to speak a little bit about the public process and engagement, because that, obviously, any major project of this scale, even if it's smaller, doesn't really go without involving the public in as many opportunities as you possibly can see. So part of our program here, it talks about this public participation plan, where we work closely with staff, and what's great with Court and his team, they've created with the city manager, they've created what we call a technical review committee. And we've been meeting with the technical review committee to go over the technical issues of the project, kind of the nuts and bolts, grassroots elements of the project, but really starting to try to understand how do we want to engage, how do we want to get to those people, and what's the best way to interact. And we're working now with staff on this public participation plan, which really lists these study issues. And part of this plan development, which is an evolving plan, is to really work with a group like this, to understand what the issues are, what the opportunities are. I don't want to be overly negative and always talk about, what's wrong with Keene, because there's not a lot of things that are wrong. But what's great about it, and how can it be made better? How can it be used better? So we want to understand creating communication protocols and really trying to identify those key committees and stakeholders that need to be engaged. We talk about the DRC today. I think that's a great idea with liaisoning with the communities. That's really important to be all-inclusive. Community engagement is part of what we're doing right now, is with the Mayor's Ad Hoc Advisory Committee, creating focus groups, inviting groups to work with us, whether it's Bike and Ped, or it's the downtown businesses, which are dynamic and different. Creating an online presence and then working really through some good open public workshops, which we'll get into a little bit here in a while. So that's generally what our public engagement plan will look like, just trying to touch as many people as we can and involve them and listen. This is the biggest thing that we can do, is listen and understand Keene a little bit better, and then work with you on what those solutions can be. Let's dive into our work plan a little bit here. I'm going to hand that off here to Bob, and we can talk a little bit about what specifically is our work plan and how we're going to go about doing it.
Thanks, Ed. Real big picture, these are the kind of the sequence of work products that's going to continue. This is the a summary of kind of the work products that are going to continue through the process of the project. We're currently in the data collection and review stage, as well as preparing base mapping. We have base maps that are prepared from GIS. We're also in the process of getting a topographic survey done of the entire downtown, or the entire downtown that's in the work zone. As Ed mentioned, we're going to talk about the public workshops, the outreach and interaction. The first one's scheduled in a couple weeks. And from that, once we start to get a handle on what the utility impacts are going to be, we're going to start looking at the development of alternatives. We're going to generate a whole series of different alternatives, not only for the utility work, but for the public realm improvements. And those will be reviewed and analyzed as we go through the project. We talked about utility replacement design. Those are going to be looked at. And then once we start to narrow down some options and alternatives, we're going to get those costed. It's going to be really important to make sure that we understand what the impacts are from a cost standpoint, and that the city can afford what's being proposed. And then obviously a really important part of the project is how it gets implemented. We can't just blow up all of downtown while this is going on. We need to make sure that we minimize impacts to the users and the businesses. And so project phasing is going to be an important part of the project as well.
talk a little bit before we get onto the kind of the installation side of things, is just our community engagement and how we approach that best. And this really includes everybody, as I mentioned before, staff. Staff is really important. They're the kind of the lifeline of what goes on here. Our local residents, that's really, really important. They feel it, they use it every day, and that's incredible. Our businesses that do business here, and it's a lifeline. This is really important. We'll talk again about phasing here and how do we keep downtown open while we kick up a lot of dust. It'll be a pretty significant project, but also not losing track of visitors and patrons. We want visitors to continue to come here and be here, and we want to invite them, even amongst the work that's being done, and having gone through several major downtown projects, in my experiences, is creating the opportunities for people to continue to come. And despite, or I shouldn't use, that's a bad word to use, but in complement with the work that's ongoing. That's incredibly important. So several of these workshop tools that we'll be looking at is a number of interactive exercises and really chances to talk with the project team and staff. We would expect staff would be there as well, just to understand some of these issues. What we have graphically showing here is what we call a cross-section exercise. That's the graphic that's on the left side where, we do have a fixed amount of right-of-way. So when we're looking at what could be street, sidewalk, grass, landscaped area improvements that would happen along that area, it is a very fixed number. So this is an opportunity for people to really start to visualize what's most important to them. Are they wider sidewalks? Is it multiple lanes? Is it dedicated bike lanes? All of that can be really used in a tool like this to say, here's the space constraints. We can dream and wish, but we also know we can't move buildings. So there's part of that, and all of that is kind of flanked around the utility work that will come first. The other way is looking at mapping and concern areas. So on the right graphic is just a layout plans on tables that will be set up. And we'll go through issues and concerns and what is great, what is really important to the character and vision of Keene that you don't want to change. We want to really make sure that we stress the importance of that. I'm going to hand it back to Dave here to talk a little bit about construction phasing and how we go about that, because that's critically important on any major project like this in a downtown core.
Sure, thanks, Ed. Yeah, so as both Ed and Bob have talked a little bit to in the last few minutes, phasing is one of the critical aspects of this project. Both on the top side and access to business, allowing the residents and patrons and visitors to the city get in and move around within the downtown area, but also maintaining water service and sewer service and maintaining that utility service to all the users throughout construction. So in this project, it's something that we're going to need to consider from the beginning as we develop these alternatives. How they're going to be phased and how they're going to interact is something that we're going to look at. I don't know if traditionally is the right word, but in the past, sometimes we look at a whole project, we design the project, and then just chop it up. Phase one would be from point A to point B and then B to C, whereas in this case, it's something that we've got to consider as we go through, is how do we keep this water line active for everyone at the same time? How is that going to impact the top side? And how does that kind of drive what alternatives are going to move forward to the top of the list, and how it gets staged? So, in addition to access, the city's going to want to keep their public space and keep their events moving forward on a year-to-year basis. Schools need to be open, and we've got to be aware of when schools are in and when they're not. Emergency services, the fire department, adjacent to the project areas is going to be something we'll have to consider as we go through it. As well as multimodal accessibility, as has been discussed a couple times in here already. That's another big piece of construction, is how do we keep that accessibility active and in place throughout construction. So all these factors are going to be part of that phasing. It's going to be something that we're considering throughout the project, and it's something that as we talk with the public and the businesses at some of these events, we're going to be looking for input and thoughts on how things operate throughout the city.
Right.
Too many.
I'll talk a little bit about our schedule here, and I know this is kind of small and hard to read, but the point that we're where we are right now is we're in the midst of this planning study, and we're really in kickoff phase, and we're gathering a lot of information. So we outline in green. You can see this is the kind of that planning element. There's a lot of interaction with either this committee or the TRC, the Technical Review Committee, stakeholders groups, business groups, even back to City Council on several occasions. That's going to be really important. We would expect that 2022 would wrap up, with our planning study and design alternatives throughout the year here. As the project phases change to construction or implementation, we would see that there would likely be 3 phases that would follow. And I'm just saying here, 2023, 2024, and 2025 of some form or fashion. First by the major utility project that would need to be done, and then site restoration as you go through the multiple years. In each case, you can see that we plan and we program in additional community engagement. There's ongoing engagement as we continue to work through our public participation plan. That becomes very, very important. Let me just move along, sir. Thanks. So this is a quick snapshot slide of just, what we would expect to report back to you, and certainly this is a work in progress. So we take our cues from the mayor's committee interaction, but we understand your April 19th was your committee kickoff. You welcomed your members along. We are now at June 21, so you're hearing the introduction of the project design team. We'd like to talk about goals, review your goals, opportunities, the project work plan as we just presented. And now we're planning for our public workshop number 1, which is on June 29th, which is next Wednesday. So just over a week from now. And we've started advertising for that. We can talk a little bit about what we would expect moving forward. At our August meeting, as I understand there's not a July meeting, but August, September, and October will follow. Each of those reviewing the findings of workshop number 1, for example, and then looking at initial project findings, and then planning for workshop number 2, which is more of a concept development, look at options and potential, what is the magnitude of the utility infrastructure improvement. We'll know that a little bit better. And we'll prepare for that workshop number 2, present those findings, and then ultimately we would expect the mayor's steering committee would be advisory to the full council, and we'd get to a point where a consensus alternatives or alternative would be available. So that's what we expect here from our interaction. But again, we take the cues from the committee, and we're really happy to be part of the Keene project here, and support it however way we need to go. So with that, we thought we'd ask for if the mayor is good with that, a roundtable on a conversation of what do you see are issues, opportunities, and concerns that you'd want to convey as part of that. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. Any feedback or questions from committee members
Comments or questions?
at this point?
Or if there's any comments on anything.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. However, I think there were some lessons that could be learned from the last visioning process that we did for the downtown. The feedback that I got from participants was that they, whether perceived or real, they felt like they were being led down a direction. And I think there was some pushback to that. And so I would be very sensitive to that moving forward with the public interaction. I mean, I think I want to make clear, and I certainly don't have any preconceived notions about how this design or how these changes are going to be. And so I want to make sure that everybody throughout the process keeps an open mind and make sure that we're not steering the community on this. We're actually asking for the community's input to get us to where we need to go. Randy?
One comment. and I see the in-person workshop's going to be here at City Hall Council Chambers. I'd like to see some of these in-person workshops somewhere other than council chambers. Those of us on city council are comfortable being here. A lot of the city, your general public, isn't always all that comfortable coming into city council chambers. So I'm wondering if down the road, if we look at, is there a storefront, maybe the Colonial Theater lobby, just something where people can more, when we did the Wall Dogs project, it happened to be in an empty storefront. It was packed. I mean, these murals that are downtown Keene, the public actually picked. And they really feel they had an input, that it just wasn't city council rubber stamping something, which, you know, all communities here, as the mayor just pointed out, that no matter what they said, the council had made up their mind. So I'd like to see if there could be another location that, like I said, more of a walk-in than second floor City Hall, because I don't think we'll have a great turnout in council chambers. We never do when we do something in council chambers.
Right.
I'd like to see something just more easily accessible and more comfortable for the general public.
Want to respond?
Yeah,
to some of
I would add to that for next Wednesday, we're gonna have a spot out in Railroad Square, so we wanna do some really outside presence. We also wanna do a site walk, you know, and hopefully the weather cooperates, so at 5:30, starting at Railroad Square and walking back to Central Square, to really look, you know, what's front and center. Perfect thought on the comments of trying to be outside of council chambers. It's, you're right, some folks are comfortable, some folks aren't. We want to make sure that we create as much opportunity for everybody. You know,
Thank you.
That's perfect.
Anybody else? The other comment that I would make is, one of my major concerns is disrupting the downtown businesses. And so I think this committee and you all during your work would do well to observe the use for the different businesses in the downtown. I mean, the traffic, how Amici's operates compared to the stage and compared to the retail establishment, you know, the retail establishments downtown. I mean, that's going to be a key part, and I hope we spend a lot of time looking at that and understanding at a granular level how the downtown businesses operate. And I don't know how we can do that in a really comprehensive way, but I think that's going to be critically important. At the end of this process, I want to know that we talk to every single business owner, understand how their business operates, and made accommodations for them.
And I think that's exactly the solution, is making sure that we reach out to every business and understand them and have opportunity to, whether it's their delivery schedule, and as we get from design to construction, design is one thing. When we look at phasing into construction, it's all those issues, the timing of deliveries. When are you open, you know? When can we replace the sidewalk section? If Monday is the day that you close, then we want to know that and be able to replace that sidewalk section that day, so you don't have that day-to-day interaction. So it becomes a very complex effort, but that's what's necessary for projects like this, is make sure that we fully understand. We want to engage with the downtown businesses as much as we can, and create more roundtable sessions to have those conversations to support that. It's a great point. Great point.
Hey, Mark, do you have anything in? Anything you'd like to
Yeah.
ask?
Can you speak to how you've done this in the past? What mechanisms do we have? Is there, you know, what technology do we have to do this? I mean, is it a project manager or someone that goes and meets with downtown businesses to understand that level of need? It sounds like we're not sure about what the communication structure will be here.
Let me start. I'll use an example of a project that I managed, and we had a downtown core business group that met regularly, and we became a regular agenda item on that meeting. And if Keene doesn't have that today, maybe we suggest that something similar that could either be face-to-face or it could be virtual, to start that interaction. That became that was a very important piece of that major communication, in understanding those business limitations. I think we're gonna need to have that. And we're not shy on whether I'm a PM or somebody else. I think we as a team are committed to that and will be in front. So we want to create that. We want to work with staff, and get their mailing list or their email group so that we can create groups and start to characterize those, whether they're restaurants, whether they're offices, whether they're dentist's office or hairdressers. All of them have different dynamic needs and business practices that we need to understand. And we create this very large access database that we are able to work from and understand all those issues. So I think, what we don't know, maybe the sound of confusion is only limited to the fact that, we're now want to create this dynamic group. And that just hasn't been done yet, but, and Mark, I'll be reaching out to you very shortly to get that started. Is reaching out to businesses and those that are representative of groups of businesses to start those conversations early.
That's great, thank you. So I guess what I can offer is, would you be available for maybe a weekly check-in kind of Zoom call where we invite as many parties as we can? Is that a, what does that sound? Does that sound like a good way to go forward?
That sounds like a great way, and I'm gonna commit these two guys that are sitting right next to me that they'd love to do it too. So,
Okay.
yeah, that's really part of the business that we need to get to that level to make sure that we understand that. And as the mayor said, the worst that we can do is leave or forget somebody out. We can't do that. So making sure that if we're meeting even virtually as a check-in call or even locally here, having that on a regular basis, we might not get 100% of everybody every time, but we're going to get some of them most of the time in order to make sure that everybody is included in the end. That's important.
Mayor Hansel, do you think that we could use the city's technology in terms of putting this Zoom call together?
I'd have to defer to Rebecca on that one.
For those who don't know me, I'm Rebecca Landry, Assistant City Manager and IT Director. I'm here for Elizabeth Dragon today, who couldn't be in this meeting this afternoon. Technology is not a problem. As you can see, we can set up the technology. It's about the public meeting rules that is more of a concern, and we'd have to talk to the city attorney about whether or not we can manage a meeting like that purely online.
I think as long as we don't have a quorum of this group participating, the mayor's, during COVID, I did the Zoom meetings. If it's just a matter of setting up a Zoom meeting for people to participate in, the mayor's office could certainly do that. We've done that before, so I'd be happy to do that, Mark. You can work with my office. But a quorum of this committee can't attend. That's important.
And the magic number of that quorum, I'm sorry,
7.
is 7. Okay.
Along those same lines, are there clearly defined roles for public communication? What is Stantec responsible for? What is the city going to be responsible for? I mean, this is a huge public information effort, and I think that's going to be important to figure out who's doing what and how we can maximize the resources that we have.
Just a quick update. I know that the IT team has been in touch with Stantec's team, or Stantec has contacted our IT team about a project website and that sort of thing. And so right now, I think anything that needs to go out on the city's media is going through the Public Works Department and then rolling out from there. But we're looking to Stantec to provide the public information and all the resources.
The contact.
Yeah, we've been working on a I'd call it a micro web page, excuse me, that would essentially be a link. Your website would link to that particular page, and it would share the information, any of our scheduled meetings, any of the interaction, the goals questionnaire that the Public Works Director released to this group the other day. All of those kind of things, and then that feedback that we're getting, we'll roll that up. We return that back to our contact, which is the Public Works Director. So from the communication standpoint, if it's public meetings like this, or council meetings, then the city obviously has a protocol on those communications. Are any of those the public workshop meetings that we'll engage folks with? We'll develop meeting notes so that those are available. Any questions, concerns, comments, suggestions, we'll roll all that information up onto our webpage so people can see how this project is progressing forward. We will own that piece. But as far as formal meetings that are through the city, you'd go through your city clerk's programming on all of your meeting minutes and notices, and that will continue forward, and we'll link any of those meeting notes that might come out into our webpage. So it'll be a collaborative effort together.
Not to get too far down in the weeds, but who's going to maintain like the database of business owners and the status of the contact and all that stuff? Is that going to be the city, or is that going to be you, or is that going to be Stantec?
That hasn't been determined yet, but I think that we have the resources to help with that. So I don't know that that's been decided.
Okay. Anybody else? Mark, you all set?
Yeah, I guess as I can be, I have the same kind of weed questions, that how we document this and becomes really important. And I don't know the mechanism for that yet, but I'm looking forward to talking with Ed and the city about how we can put this together.
Okay.
Great.
Well, thank you very much.
Well, thank you. This has been a great, it's great help, great to meet the team, and you know how to probably get a hold of me. Always feel free to reach out, and we'll be active. I look forward to seeing all of you and more next Wednesday, if that's possible.
Very quickly, I do want to open it up to any members of the public that wish to comment. Just step up to the microphone, the standing mic, state your name and address for the minute taker, please.
Georgia Casamatis, and from Gilsum, New Hampshire. I own a business in Keene on Roxbury Street, 17 Rocks. And luckily, we were taken care of last year. And it was an experience for the folks that I work with at the artist studios. They run their own businesses out of the studios, so it was disruptive. And I just feel so emotionally driven for the folks on Main Street and what they're going to go through in this experience. And I've seen some other communities go through this. And it looks like on paper, it looks really smooth, but it's going to be pretty disruptive to all of us, including those off of Main Street. So just really focusing on those like exit alleyways for folks to come in and still, utilize Main Street is really important. The other thing I wanted to talk about is that I represent the arts in Keene. I'm on the Arts Alive board. I also run Friends of Public Art, and I noticed how many mural photos you guys used. I was a big piece of helping that mural festival come to Keene. Art is important to the city, and we've had public meetings about it. We just had the Communities Institute of Rural Design come to Keene, and we got a $6,000 grant for this project, and we had community participation focused around how we could help mobilize a past idea brought to Keene from a former organization, and it's called the Arts Corps, and we have a 30-plus page PowerPoint document that I'd love to share with you directly and everyone else that wants a copy. They did a detailed architectural study on how they could see Gilbo Ave differently and with the public input. So to save you guys any kind of work on the art input, I'd love to have that included in the future conversations. And I'd love to just keep coming to these meetings to keep throwing my fist up for art and how we can mobilize local artists. We have a lot of people here, fabricators. We can remake downtown locally. with metal workers, street lights, trash cans. I've seen it done in Rhode Island. It's not that hard to get local artists involved in the design and fabrication of very common everyday things. And they're local, so if it breaks, they can come fix it, and you don't have to buy a new one. So lots of ideas here. Also, sidewalk art. Want to put poetry in the sidewalks, so when concrete gets redone, I'd love to work with whoever I can to help mobilize a public poetry contest or what have you. It doesn't have to be poetry, but just art in the sidewalks, and it is handicap accessible friendly. And being someone that had to use a wheelchair earlier this year, it is not handicap accessible out there. It's really bad. And I know it's really important to the folks who run the city too, so just, yeah, keep all that in mind. Thank you so much for having this.
Thank you, Georgia. Any other members of the public? All right, I think we're all set with that. Public Works Director?
Great, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to be aware, the city staff did meet with Jessica Gelder, and the other day, we do have an electronic copy of the work that has been done by Arts Alive, and that will be passed on to Stan Tech for their information as part of it. I also like to go over with Ed and you the goals questionnaire. As mentioned, I did send that link out to everybody, but we do have them up here. I'd like to take a few moments and just kind of go through it to make sure the questions are going to be kind of bringing forward the information that we're certainly interested in getting from the community. So Ed, if you want to,
Sure.
it's up on the screen now. If you guys want to talk a little bit about the survey, that's, again, we're going to be releasing this, I think, after the workshop.
That's correct.
So this will be released on the 30th. Will be available for, again, folks to go to the website, participate in this. This information will then be, again, consolidated, used as part of the discussion, also presented at your August meeting. So with that, I'll turn it over for you for a few moments. If you want to walk through the questions, see if there's anything that the committee would be interested in adjusting.
Sure, that's great. Thanks, Court. And so
Hang on one second,
Just a
want to
quick-
give Rebecca a chance.
Thank you, Mayor. A quick question. Before you start going into these questions individually, can you explain who the intended audience is for these questions?
Great, it's great. It's really we would hope that it would really get out to the general public. It's really for any and all. This is a great way to build at least goals and visions on what it means, and it means something different to you, to staff, and to residents and businesses a little bit different. So we want to. It's our effort. Our goal would be to share this around, put this up on that web page, and we would announce that at our public workshop that it would be available, and invite people to use it. We wanted to make sure that we shared with you in advance to make sure that this made sense and where this came from. Because when something is stated as a goal, it looks as though it's been discussed, considered, and approved. And certainly this is a first salvo of our attempt to listen. So. There are 9 goals on here that we're showing, and we just gleaned this out of any of the previous project documents, out of the RFP solicitation that came out, and then our discussion during the selection process, as well as our review with staff to come up with these goals. And we thought that this was a really good time for you folks to look at them. Does it make sense? Does it apply? Does it not apply? So that we could actually, following that workshop and go live on our webpage, is to adjust this and have one final document. That would be the intent here. So, I could just quickly go through. Goal 1 is the advanced priority utility and infrastructure improvements. We understand that that's a bit of a heavy lift, and it will be a heavy lift. And water, sewer, and drain lines that, they're not the most handsome things that you have to deal with, but in order to maintain a strong downtown community, utility improvements are required, and it's been a while where major improvements have been made. So it's coming down now to a top priority. So We just wanted to make sure that, we're capturing that piece of this project is that utility infrastructure improvement component. So these, as we said, we've arranged these. They're not in any particular order, even though they're numbered. And we could drop the numbering so that they're not an indication of priority by any means. We'll leave that really up to the steering committee on what your thoughts are. We talked a little bit about defining and expanding that downtown district. Would love to get some feedback from you on that. Embrace opportunities for a more sustainable built environment. We understand that maintaining infrastructure is very difficult, and we live in a world now of really constrained budgets. We get that. We also lived through that. So making sure that whatever we do is built to last and built to maintain. That's really, really important. So we've outlined that as something that we heard you say quite clearly. What is the image and character of the downtown? And as Bob said, our first thought is preserve. How do we best preserve completing the utility improvements and preserve what you have here? This is a unique character. Georgia mentions the arts, unprecedented arts effort that goes on in Keene, which is very, very impressive. Other downtowns really struggle with that. But you guys have found that niche, and congratulations to you. It's very, very well done. So how do we strengthen that image and character of downtown Keene? And how do we create better, flexible open space? More and more pressures or more and more requests you guys hear of more activities downtown. So how do we make it convertible enough that it can be set up quite easily, more readily? Through some creative design, we can probably help you with that. So that becomes really important for what your future is. And if COVID brought anything, COVID brought the advent of using the public spaces for more business-related activities, and that seems to be the future. That's a direction. And we've done a lot of work with a number of communities to get to that ground. That's really, really important. Improve multimodal transportation access. This is trying to create opportunities for all modes of transportation, whether it's bike, pedestrian, vehicles, public transit, anything. We want to make sure that we're looking at infrastructure as a whole. And we certainly need to make sure that we're aware of parking. Parking in any downtown core is critically important, and we get that. And sometimes one space loss or one space gained is a critical component of any success. So we want to make sure that we understand what the community's feel is there. We want to hear that from the community. And stakeholder engagement. Goal number 8 is listed here as not necessarily a project goal, but it's more of a expected project process, I would call it. And that process is that we would not forget anybody or leave anybody behind. That's really important. And Mark mentioned that, is creating opportunities to talk to as many people as possible. So we put that up there because we understand that that's really, really important to that. And the final one that's on there is really looking at improving universal accessibility and circulation in the downtown core project area. We hear that time and time again is opportunity in creating new infrastructure. We need to make sure that we are aware and conscious of those that need special access, not necessarily special access, but need access that's reliable and equal. So part of that we will be certainly looking at. And on this tool, if you hit next, it just opens up some other comments that you might want to share. Are we missing anything from what we heard before and what you've done in the past? Are we missing anything? And we want to make sure that we hear it all. So that's the goal summary, and hopefully this is a tool that's intuitive. That information comes back to us, and we share that with you on comments. So good or bad, we want to make sure that we document that. and we know the full story. So, thank you.
Thank you. I'll just provide a couple of comments. I would definitely take the numbering out because we haven't discussed prioritization for these. The other thing I'm really curious about is if you could help us come up with some engagement targets for this type of thing. One of my issues with these types of surveys is, you come back with 10 responses. Is that good? Are we getting the depth of response that we need? So I would like to see engagement targets for this whole process. How many people should we be trying to get to these forums? How many people should we have filling out these surveys? Based on your experience in other communities that had success, where should we be aiming? That would be really, really helpful. Dylan?
Great.
Yeah, I don't have any experience with like survey design or anything, but I've taken a few and I've been involved with some. My gut when I read through this was, I thought the numbering also kind of threw me off because it does seem like it's on purpose, but it felt like there's a lack of context and like these questions themselves weren't very accessible for the general public to log on. If they were just to get this link, my gut says they're going to look at that and then click away because I don't want to lead people to a certain answer by providing too much context about what things mean or what the downtown district should be defined as, but I feel like there's just some middle ground that could make it more accessible to the general public as a survey.
Natalie?
Hi, it's Natalie Howder. I certainly agree with some of the points that you just went over. I'm just curious as to whether there will be a context statement as a reader opens this, that they understand what the survey is intended for. Secondly, will this be an anonymous, or will you be classifying the respondents so we're able to measure the responses, whether it's coming from a business, resident, somebody that just works in town, so that we understand where those responses are coming from. A third piece is just starting with number 9, and certainly about context. Is downtown core project area a defined term? Would somebody reading this that's just part of our public understand what you're referring to and what you're looking for here? I think often when you have surveys, it's helpful for each of the survey. I think you're right, don't lead them down a path, but at least provide some information as to, I think some of the language used is a little, I don't know, I happen to come from a transportation company, so I kind of understand multimodal, but I'm not sure everybody reading that understands what multimodal means. So just some comments on making it easier for a user in our public, as our public has a lot of, it's coming from a different background. Thank you.
Thank you. Rebecca?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm glad that I waited and heard those comments first because I had similar thoughts as I read through the survey. The average reading level of the American public, more than 50% of people read at an 8th grade level. And in addition to that, the word infrastructure is going to mean different things to different people. Priority, infrastructure improvements could mean different things to different people. So I love the idea, whether it's that or downtown district, which means one thing to you, one thing to you. I love the idea of just 1 or 2 sentences of context on each question, just to help people understand what the goal really is. And that's just one opinion. And the idea of having some metrics behind the survey so we know how broad an audience actually engaged and participated would be very, very beneficial.
Further comments on the survey from the committee?
I noticed that the fields, while we're asking for a very kind of long answer, the fields don't show the entire text that I think that the question is asking for. You're only going to see about a sentence of what you type in there, which makes it really difficult to craft a good answer.
Thanks, Mark.
Wait.
Anybody else? Okay.
Thank you. Great feedback.
Well, great. Well, thank you. I'm going to give a little homework for the committee. We've been talking about a lot of different things today, and I hope you all realize you were selected for the committee for various reasons, because you do represent various groups, various activities in the community. One of the things I am asking, certainly, if you have lists or you know of lists that are utilized by the organizations you work with, please send them through myself and Duncan. We'll get those on to Stantec, as they have indicated they're trying to pull together this, because that's one of the challenges. Many of you know I've been here for a couple years, and particularly in downtown, groups sort of ebb and flow, and I know Mark has been involved in that. We sometimes have a strong group in one particular area, but then they sort of move on and then another area. So I am asking your all help in making sure that we can get those contacts. If you know of spaces, we were very fortunate, like I said, for Wall Dogs, back a number of years ago, there were a number of open spaces in the downtown. One of the things that we're trying to do is we are trying to stay sort of within a walkable area here. We're looking at the library potentially maybe for something, but again, some people think the library is too far away, is off it. So if you have space or you know of a space that's a person would be excited to potentially hold something at, please, again, feed that back to me. So for example, right now, I've shot out 185 email addresses that I have from other projects involved in downtown that went out this morning. I'm going to be on Danny's Mitchell show on Tuesday talking about the event on Wednesday. Getting out there. So if you need some of that information, I do have electronic formats of the flyer for the workshop, etc. Please let me know. I will get those to you, and you can send them out to the folks you know. I'm also asking you all to come on out as part of the event. As Ed has indicated, we do have, it's pretty much for the entire day, not asking you all to come out and be there for the entire day. But if you can make the walkabout at 5:30, please join the walkabout. Again, not 7. Less than 7 is great. Come in the evening hours up here to listen, participate. Bring some folks with you. That's always something that we try to do on projects, is that I try to encourage, if you know somebody, get them to come with you, then they get excited, hopefully, or they get shocked, and then they go out and grab 5 more people and they come and go to it. So again, I'm encouraging the committee to come out on the 29th, somewhere during that day time frame to participate in that. As you have thoughts, certainly please forward them on to, you have my email, Duncan Watson's email, and also Ed's. All the communications that I try to do is keep those 3 folks there. You can reply and send them all that way. And again, I'll be consolidating and getting that on to Stantec. Believe it or not, again, there's been lots of work that has been going on. This is the techie weed folks. Stantec has been meeting a lot with my staff, particularly because with the utility side. We do meet, just to give you an idea, myself, Don Lucier, city engineer, Duncan Watson, we do have a weekly call with Ed, and sometimes I'm emailing Ed on a more higher frequency during the week, so we are communicating. As mentioned, we do have our technical review committee with the manager heads. That meets every other week. So again, as information comes in, I'll be able to get it to those groups and into Stantec fairly quickly. So I appreciate, again, anything that can be brought forward. Mayor, I don't know if the committee has any other thoughts on sort of any other area. I know it's starting to sort of come to reality. I'm anticipating that this group or some formation of it's going to continue on beyond this coming end of this calendar year, because as we move into construction, that's going to be probably a different focus group. So certainly if that's something, I'm letting you all now to think about, if that's something you want to continue on doing, keep that in your mind. Let the mayor know as we move into that phase. Your next meeting is the 16th of August. I'm giving you off July because usually that's difficult to get everybody together, but also gives staff and Stantec the ability to produce some work to be able to provide for you at the next meeting. So with that, Mayor, if there's any other thoughts or any other conversations the
Any
committee would
committee
like to have?
members want to bring up any issues that maybe we can put on the next agenda, or whatever you want? Brandy?
I just have a quick question on when the next public workshop is, if you have another one lined up.
That one is in early September, 13th, right now.
Yeah, we're looking at September 13th as workshop number 2 date, yes.
But if there is, like I said, if there are groups, as Ed mentioned, and Mark, if you all participate like in a monthly meeting of a particular entity, again, please let us know. We're willing to show up those. One of the things we've talked about is coming to a bike pack meeting, the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee meeting, showing up at one of those over the next couple months. So if you have, again, I'm looking for that input because you all have your connections in the community. If you have those sort of groups that meet on some frequency and they are going to meet this summer, please let us know and we'll see if we can get there and be part of a conversation at that meeting.
Okay, anybody else? All right, thank you all for your attention this afternoon, and thank you
Mr.
for
Chairman.
coming.
Thank you.
We stand adjourned.
And